We've had student stalker cases before, but never one that's dipped into the paranormal.
Well, we can't solve paranormal cases, but this stalker fully believed that she was motivated by paranormal activity, which is really scary for our guest.
I know what she went through would make anyone question reality.
The reality is that our guest fought back and got the justice she deserved. I'm Jaimie Beebe.
And I'm Jake Deptula. On today's episode of Strictly Stalking, we're chatting with Jenifer, a college professor who was stalked by a former student who developed a disturbing, romantic, and spiritual obsession over her.
After teaching one of her world religion classes, Jenifer was approached by a young female student who offered to stay behind and erase the boards.
Throughout the semester, Jenifer began to notice that this student stared at her in a day-dreamy way. Then around Valentine's Day, Jenifer received a CD mixtape of various religious songs, followed by a box of homemade fudge with a romantically worded handwritten card.
Jenifer turned to the dean of students, who told her that this student technically didn't do anything wrong, but warned Jenifer not to be alone with her.
Jenifer's stalker eventually showed up at her house and told Jenifer that she's been getting messages from the beyond, and that Jenifer's deceased friend spoke to her and told her that Jenifer was her godmother.
Frightened and angry, Jenifer sent her away, but not before her stalker revealed some private details about her relationship with her deceased friend that no one else could have known.
Jenifer, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Jenifer, what was your life like growing up?
I would say it was pretty much ideal looking from the outside. I have two older brothers who were responsible for keeping an eye on me. So I became very tomboyish and handy. I can do all the things boys can do, climbing trees and running up and down the street on a skateboard and throwing a perfect spiral football. I'm kind of proud of that. So I'm pretty tough, but my mom always made sure that I had a nice dress and fancy stockings for the family occasions. And then she would send me out with my brothers and I would quickly ruin those outfits, but it was all fun.
How did you get into education?
I initially wanted to be an attorney. And after my bachelor's degree, I did an internship at the Long Beach City Prosecutor's Office. And I realized that I was more interested in researching the law and studying the law than I was in writing the briefs and practicing it. And that's when I decided that I would become an attorney, become a professor, so that I could teach the material and continue researching as opposed to practicing the law. And then I got into a little bit more spiritual side, and it switched from political science to philosophy, which included religion.
What's your approach to teaching world religions?
I teach world religions from the philosophical perspective. So rather than looking at the theology behind each religion, I find the commonalities between Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and show the humanity that's behind each religion. And really every religion is just trying to teach us how to be better humans. And so I kind of find that common thread throughout each religion.
How long had you been teaching before you met this student?
About 5 years.
And what was your first impression of your student?
So I teach at community colleges, and typically the age range is between 18 and 25. And when in looking at her, I thought she was definitely, fresh out of high school. She was very innocent. She had big eyes that just would, seem to just be in awe of everything she was learning. And that's common among first-time college students. And so I just assumed that she was a first-time college student. I thought she was 18 and soaking up everything. She was very, very smart, straight-A student, did every assignment on time, very well written. Her homework assignments would be perfect, grammatically and really absorbing the lessons. So I had a very positive first impression of her.
What was your first encounter like with her?
It was around, so the semester started at the end of January. So it was around Valentine's Day, like 3 weeks into the semester, that she brought me a CD with a bunch of religious songs. And I was like, oh, wow, that's awesome. Thank you. I am not particularly religious, but the CD had songs from various cultures. So it wasn't just, there was like some Southern revivalist type of music. And then there were also Gregorian chants. And then there were some like Middle Eastern Islamic songs on there. So it was interesting. Not my cup of tea, but it was interesting. And then when she gave me that, I was like, okay, wow, that's a lot of effort to put in, to give a gift for Valentine's Day. But then she started lingering and erasing the boards, and she would wait so that we would end up walking out together to the parking lot. And since it started to happen more and more frequently, I would find an excuse, either ducking out to the restroom or going into the teacher's lounge so that I wouldn't have to walk out with her. Because sometimes I'm in my own headspace after class, and I don't want to talk to people beyond my office hours after class. So found myself ditching her.
Did you feel like you were ditching her like that because she was making you uncomfortable in some way, or you just didn't really feel like talking to her?
A little of both. A little of both. I felt like she maybe inadvertently trying to be a teacher's pet, but it's not like she was being purposefully annoying, just a little clingy. And so I felt like she was, again, sometimes I just would want to be in my own headspace, or if I had something I had to handle and she would continue talking, then I'd be, I feel rude trying to cut her off. And I just would make an excuse. Oh, I have to use the restroom, or I need to go make copies in the teacher's lounge or something like that to get rid of her.
What were the things she was talking about during this time? Was it just to do with school, or was it more personal?
A lot of the things that she would ask about would be, how would this particular religion handle this particular topic that we would talk about on that day. She was very interested in the beliefs in, like, how they handle death and how they handle the afterlife. What do they believe? Say, like in Hinduism, when somebody dies, what happens in the afterlife with that particular person? But beyond that, I don't remember anything in particular, because I found out later that her brother had died, and I didn't know that. She didn't reveal that to me at any time during the class. So I found that interesting, that even though she was interested in my perceptions, not in sharing much about herself.
Did you see her interact with any other students in class?
Never.
And then, so during this time, did you reach out to anybody and say, oh, I have this student, it's making me feel uncomfortable? Or did you just kind of like pass it off and just, move on?
Yeah, exactly. I figured that she was just a wide-eyed, interested student and was trying to absorb all the information she could. I didn't put any bad intentions to her at that time at all. I just thought she was just trying to learn as much as possible, and was maybe just socially unaware that she was making me feel a little awkward in the way that she approached it.
Jake, I know you can't wait to talk about your deodorant.
It's true, because I enjoy working up a sweat, but don't want to smell like I'm still in the gym.
And that's why we use Each and Every, the natural deodorant that keeps us odor-free all day. It provides odor protection equal to an antiperspirant without the aluminum.
It goes on smooth and feels great on my skin without leaving any messy residue or stains. And since it's designed to be gender inclusive, we both use it.
We sure do. And our listeners should too. My favorite is the geranium and snow mushroom.
Today, I'm wearing the unscented and fragrance-free.
I definitely can't smell you.
It's made with 6 safe, simple ingredients like Dead Sea salt and coconut oil, plus natural essential oils and extracts for fragrance. So they leave out other nasty chemicals that can irritate your skin, like parabens and baking soda.
And it's vegan, cruelty-free, and sustainably sourced right down to the new plant-based packaging. It's actually the first eco-conscious, carbon-negative material used in deodorant.
That's why I feel so good about using it, and I know our listeners will too.
Take it from us. Each and Every works.
And for a limited time, our listeners get 30% off their first purchase. Order now.
Visit eachandevery.com/stalking today and use promo code STALKING.
Don't wait. That's promo code STALKING at eachandevery.com/stalking.
Jake, why are you on your phone?
I'm putting my detective skills to the test with the free Small Town Murders Crime Mystery Puzzle game. What else would I be doing, Jaimie?
I don't blame you. I love solving mysteries too.
I keep playing because it really gives my mind a workout, especially when I figure out what all those clues mean and solve a case. Have you tried it?
Of course. I'm on level 79. What level are you on?
No comment. I better get back to playing then.
Yeah, catch up. There are more than 2,000 levels and 700 clues and pieces of evidence to collect, with 14 cases and new cases added every month.
Those puzzles are a real brain teaser for me.
I bet they are. It's the game everyone's talking about. Become a detective today.
All you have to do is download Small Town Murders free on the Apple App Store or Google Play.
You'll love this interactive murder mystery game as much as we do.
That's Small Town Murders on the Apple App Store or Google Play. Download it today.
What were the first red flags that you saw from her?
Okay, so I would always leave a day where, usually towards the end of the semester, where I would have students, because in this particular school, it was a very multicultural city. And we had students from various religions every semester. And so I would have a day where we would have like a potluck and bring something, for your particular religion's holiday, bring a special dish. And so like my Jewish students would bring some challah, the braided bread. Or I actually had a Zoroastrian student make cookies in shapes of these coins that are special to them at this time of year. And she came in with a pizza, which I thought was funny. But she's like, I don't have a religious meal, but I thought everyone would appreciate pizza, which is true. Everyone loves pizza. But then the way that she was like, it's like she was like the room mother afterwards. So she was cleaning up, and she would, some things that I would normally do, because you're technically not supposed to have food in the classroom, but she just like took it upon herself to help me clean up. And that's when I felt like a little too much, where I had to say to her, you know what? You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. And she's like, oh no, I want to. It's okay. I like to be helpful. And she was very soft-spoken like that too, which is also disarming, because it almost makes it a little more frightening. Well, after the potluck day, it was about a week later, that was the last day of class. So she shows up with this homemade fudge and the card. And I figured, well, it's the final. At this particular college, I'm only teaching the one class. So I'm not gonna see her again. She's not gonna be in another one of my classes. And so I took the fudge and I was like, okay, thank you very much. That's very sweet. And I love chocolate. So I got into my car and I take a bite of the fudge and I'm like, oh, wow, this is really good. And then I open her card and I'm chewing the fudge, and I was literally like spitting out the fudge as I'm reading the card, because the card was, it said, thank you for, allowing me to take this journey together with you. And I'm like, there's no journey, there's no together, it just was very, very strange. She said, I hope that you're the type of person who can love unconventionally. And then there was like some poem that she included where it said, I am afraid to jump in with both feet. So I dip my toe in the water so that I can retreat quickly. Something like that. And I was like, wow, this is beyond, anything that I've ever experienced. And, I drove home and I showed my husband, I threw the fudge away because I was a little afraid. And he said, don't throw that card away. Put it with your finals, because I'm supposed to keep my exams for a year. Put it with the finals. Like that's a little creepy. And I'm like, well, we don't have to worry about her anymore, because I'm not teaching any more classes. So then it was the summer, and, I didn't think anything of it for the next 2.5 months. And then I was teaching at another college. I was teaching 2 classes, and different classes than world religions. I was teaching Intro to Philosophy and Intro to Women's Studies. And the night before class, I printed out my rosters, and she had registered in both classes. And the thing is that these colleges weren't close by each other. And I know a lot of students take classes, especially back then when classes were really packed. They would take classes at 2 different colleges so that they can get done on time, usually within the same district, so that, it makes sure that they count. This college was a little further away. And so that was alarming to me, because I don't know anybody who would take classes at those 2 colleges. So the next morning, I went to the dean at this other college and I told her what happened. She said, please bring me the card so that we can take a copy of it and put it in her file. Don't be alone with her. Don't let her erase the boards or anything like that. And don't walk out with her at all. And just, we'll see what happens, because technically she hasn't done anything wrong. Being creepy is not, illegal. So then 3 weeks later, it's my day off and I'm at home and she knocks on the door. And I looked through the window and I saw, blonde hair, and I saw these two little toddlers, little blonde tow-headed toddlers. And I thought it was my new neighbor who had moved in a few doors down. So I opened up the door all like, oh, hey, and it was her. And it was little boy-girl twins. And the little boy just runs in my house and she takes a step into my house to go after him. And I put my hand up like this for her, like to stop. And I reached and I grabbed the little boy and I'm like, no, sweetie, outside, go on outside. And that's what started the whole next phase of her escalating.
So it's crazy that she just showed up there with two kids. Do you know how she found where you lived or any of that?
Well, because I own the home with my husband, it was an easy Google search. And even though I regularly go on these, white pages sites and have my information erased, you have to really stay on top of it, because then another site just pops up with your address. So at that particular time, my address was not listed, but there was a nice aerial photo of my house with an arrow, pointing to my address. So even though she couldn't find the actual physical address, it wasn't difficult to find. And then when I went to my neighbors to say, okay, look out for this person, my other next door neighbor said, oh yeah, she's been here several times with those kids. So she had been to my house a few times knocking on the door, and I just hadn't been home.
Did you ask her whose kids they were? Where did these kids come from?
I said, are these your kids? Because again, I still thought she was 18 years old. And she said, no, they're my niece and nephew. And then I found out later that her brother had died. And that's what she meant by helping her heart heal, was because she was dealing with the death of her brother. And she had moved back home to help her parents care for these toddlers.
If somebody randomly showed up at my house, especially with two kids running in my house, I would just be like, what the fuck is going on? Did you question her at all? Did you send her away? How did you end it?
What the hell are you doing here? I said, this is completely inappropriate. If my husband were here right now, he would tear you a new one. And then after, when she told me a few things, I said, you realize by coming here, you're going to have to drop my classes. And that's when she really started crying and losing it. But I said, what are you doing here? Why are you here? And she said, I am able to get messages from the beyond. And I looked at her and she said, the spirits sometimes talk to me. And I'm like, okay. And then she said, your friend Galit told me to come. And I was like, Galit, like, this is my friend who passed away in 2009. And this is now 2015. And what surprised me was, this is a Hebrew name, Galit. And the way that it's spelled, unless you know Hebrew, you would pronounce it Galit. Most people pronounce it Galit until Galit would correct them. And she pronounced it perfectly, which was surprising to me. So she said, Galit told me to come and wanted me to tell you that she was upset because she felt like she was being forgotten. And that stunned me, because that is absolutely something that Galit would do. Galit was larger than life. She was gorgeous and very outspoken and would never have wanted to be forgotten. She died leaving a 3-year-old girl behind, and her biggest fear was that her daughter would forget her and that people would forget her. And so I don't know where she would have gotten that information, because I've scoured my eulogy for her. I looked at other posts that were on her memorial page, and nowhere in there does it say that Galit feared being forgotten. That was just something that I knew, her husband knew, her very close friends knew, and we've done our best to not allow her to be forgotten. But when she said that, I was just like, whoa, wait a minute. And I said, well, what else did she tell you? And she said, Galit said that you are my godmother. And I'm like, okay, well, hold on now. I'm not your godmother. I'm not anything to you other than, you're a former professor. And I said, and now you're going to have to drop my classes. And she started crying. And I said, you've gotten some misinformation. I am not your godmother. And she said, maybe she meant that she is my godmother. And I'm like, okay, so Galit was Jewish and she doesn't believe in godmothers. And so no, she's not your godmother either. And then she said, well, why would she play me like that? And I'm like, I don't know, but you need to leave. Like, you need to leave now. And so she was crying. She grabbed the 2 little kids, and these toddlers were like 2 years old. She held their hands and she's wailing, and she put the kids in the car in front of my house. And even I'm watching through the open window to make sure that she leaves. And I can hear her wailing as she's driving away. And so this was, I don't know if, I think that when it all is said and done, she might have actually believed that this happened the way it did.
What do you believe?
I just got chills. I don't know. I called the dean that I had spoken to initially. I said, the student showed up at my house just now. She said, okay, I'm going to have campus security call you. And then call the dean at the other college where I had met her initially. Let them know the same thing. Both colleges were very alarmed and very protective. So from that day forward at both campuses, I had police escorts. I called them when I'm getting off the freeway and I'm getting, I'll be there in 5 minutes. And they would meet my car and they would escort me to class. And then they knew what time I got out of class. There was an officer waiting to escort me back. At the initial campus, the parking lot was a little further away. So they would meet me in a golf cart and I would actually get picked up and taken door-to-door service. The next day, this officer who I had spoken to met me in the parking lot, and he walked me to class, and I looked in the classroom and she was already sitting there. And so even though I had told her that she had to drop the classes, she showed up anyway. And I said, oh my gosh, that's her. Like, she's there. So they went in, they escorted her out. And then apparently she met with the dean and told the same story to the dean about the messages from beyond and all of that. And the dean said, the interesting thing is I don't think she's lying. I think she's telling the truth. Now, whether or not it actually happened like that, she believes that it happened. And that's kind of what I believe, that she believes it. And so the dean, as compassionate as she was, told her that she would need to be reviewed by a psychotherapist in order to come back to classes at that college. And she referred her to a therapist who actually specializes in spiritual work as well as regular psychotherapy. And she told her, you should go, because if you are truly getting messages from the beyond, you don't want the spirits manipulating you into doing things that are going to get you into trouble like this. And so that was a good way to get her to go to a therapist under that guise. So she left, and I never saw her again for the rest of the semester. So the interesting thing is that the security officer at that college goes home, tells his wife what an interesting day he's had, and says, he told his wife about the name Galit and how this student pronounced it properly. And his wife goes, wait, Galit? You mean this Galit? And he goes, yeah. And so then he comes to me and he says, do you know who my wife is? And I said, yes, she was a friend of Galit's. And he goes, yes, oh my gosh. And when I told her what happened, do you know what she said? Oh my God, Galit would totally do something like that. And so that was like another interesting thing that gave me chills. It was like this recognition that if there is a way to communicate from the spirit world, Galit would be the type of person who would find out how to get through. And she would get the message through any way that she could. So,
well, now you're giving me chills.
I know. She really was an amazing, amazing person. And she hardly ever took no for an answer. So if someone in the beyond is a gatekeeper and says, no, you can't get through, she would find a way to get through.
Were you fearful of the student at this point?
Well, so for somebody to react to messages from beyond, either, thinking that she did or actually did, it was frightening for me, because you don't know what they're capable of, no matter how soft-spoken they might be. From that point on, I carried a taser with me everywhere, because I never knew where she could show up. She knew the two schools where I worked. She knew where I lived. She had to have known. I mean, I introduced myself on the first day of class saying that, I have kids and their ages were appropriate for the same ages as the students that I was teaching. So, and I do that as a way of connecting with them. Like, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're feeling. I have children your age. And so she knew. And so that was frightening for them as well. I'm sure it had to be unnerving to make sure that no one was following them when they went through the front door. And we used to have the garage door open all day, Saturday and Sunday, and we'd sit out front, or we had kind of a little man cave in the garage, and my boys would play video games in there. And so it was a little unnerving for them too, to have to always look around. Do you see cars? Do you see cars you don't recognize? Something that I wouldn't have wanted to have had to teach them.
How did your student escalate after coming to your house and then still going to the show? Did she go get therapy? What happened next?
So she kind of disappeared for 2 years. And, I started to relax a little bit. And then I got another new neighbor. I got two neighbors, one next door and then one next door to them. And our mailboxes, the 3 mailboxes, were all together in one spot on the sidewalk. And just one day randomly, when the other new neighbor moved in, a bunch of office furniture showed up on the sidewalk there by the mailbox. It was like a bookshelf, a desk, a chair. And I didn't think anything of it, because with the 2 new neighbors, I figured, well, this stuff doesn't fit. It doesn't work, whatever. And they're going to call somebody to come and get rid of it. And it stayed there for about 4 or 5 days. And, we have a homeowners association, so people get a little uptight. And finally, one of the husbands of the neighbors just, I guess, called, to have it picked up or dumped it somewhere. And I didn't think anything of it. And then 2 weeks later, we have like a neighborhood group text. And I'm in the market And a text shows up on this group text saying, "Who keeps leaving their shit in front of my house?" And I'm like, okay, it's not me, because, I would put it in front of my own house. I wouldn't put it in front of my neighbor's house. I have no idea. Everybody, I have no idea. I have no idea. So then I'm driving home and I get another text saying, "Does anybody know this student's name?" And then they say this student's name. And I still get chills right now just thinking of that moment. My whole body just went cold because it was her. And so I pulled up and she's like, my neighbor says that there's some weird items here. So she had left. It was like a truckload, like a pickup truckload of stuff. She had left bike helmets, like little kid, boy and girl bike helmets. She left just lots of little trinkets and some clothing items. And there were 2 T-shirts, one large and one small. And one said, "You are my," and the other one says "sunshine." And the sun was cut in half. So when you put the 2 together, they were matching shirts. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. And then some of the items that she left, one was a ceramic baby booty. And it had her name on it, the birth weight, the date she was born. And then there was also those little metal ID bracelets that we had when we were kids that had their name, address, and phone number, right? In case you got lost, you could show somebody. So that was there. So that's where her name was, that the neighbor found out who was doing that. And then there was this huge canvas bag. It was probably at least 3 feet high, full of wine corks, which seems so random. But then there was some artwork done with the wine corks. And just lots of items that, a friend of mine who is also a neighbor is a psychotherapist. And I called her up and I'm like, "Come take a look at this and tell me what's going on here." And she said, this is a mother type of fixation, that she has mother issues. She looks at you as a mother figure. And then that's when I remembered. I'm like, she told me I was her godmother, or that Galit was her godmother. And then she told me also, which was a little bit concerning, that the cork art that she had done was something that people do when they're in like a mental hospital, because the cork is safe, and they can make art with that. So that really freaked me out. I called the police and they registered each and every item. And I used the phone number from the ID bracelet, and I called her house to speak to somebody in her family to let them know what was going on.
Who answered when you called?
So her mother answered, and I told her everything. And she apologized and said she's had a hard time since her brother died. And that's when I found out that her brother died and that she had moved back home to help care for the niece and nephew. And then I also found out that she was planning on moving. She was moving out, which is probably why she was dumping all this stuff at my house. And she was moving to Los Angeles to become a preschool teacher. And so now I'm like, okay, so this psycho woman is going to be around a bunch of little children. And that was concerning to me as well. And then I also found out that she wasn't this wide-eyed, innocent 18-year-old. She was actually 26 years old, already had a bachelor's degree, and was taking these intro-level classes for fun, which is fine, but not following the professor around from college to college to do it.
Did you tell her mother what she's been doing to you?
Yes.
How did she react?
She apologized and she just said that she was having a hard time, coping with her brother's death. But I guess she hadn't even mentioned me to her mother, beyond, I have this professor who I really like.
What do you think was going on in the 2 years that you didn't hear from her until she dumped her stuff at your house?
I have no idea. Other than her getting her credential to teach preschool. I have no idea. The mother didn't. I wasn't interested in finding out, more details of her life, because obviously, if I show any interest, then that just encourages her. I was really just calling the mother to warn her that maybe she shouldn't be alone with the kids, that something deeper is going on. Because as a mother, obviously, I would want to know that too about my own kids.
So she dropped all these things off your house. You called the police. You also called her mother. What happened after that?
At that point, my husband and I decided that it's probably a good idea to get a restraining order. And so that's what we did. I went to court the day of the hearing. She didn't show up, so the restraining order was issued. I got confirmation from the marshal's department that she had been served in person. So she knew that she's not to come within 500 feet of me, not to enroll in any of my classes, no matter where I taught. Because I taught at more than those two colleges. So I know now that sometimes getting a restraining order can actually enrage stalkers and make them even more determined to invade your life. But thankfully, in the 2 years that the restraining order was in effect, I haven't heard anything. But since then, I got my CCW, and I did start my Kempo karate training again, which I had stopped for about 17 years. And so I've been hard at that for the last 3 years. And, that's really all I can do. I can't look over my shoulder for the rest of my life, but I can be prepared if something like that ever happened again.
Do you know if she did move to Los Angeles, or do you know where she's at now?
The fact that she had a restraining order would prevent her from being a teacher. And there's a part of me that feels a little bad about that. But then on the other hand, I feel like I'm protecting those potential students, or maybe one of their parents who might become a mother figure or some sort. From what I understand, you guys would probably know this better than I do, being that you're doing the show specifically on stalkers. But the best way to get rid of a stalker is when they find a new fixation. And so, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. It's very, very frightening, but she hasn't shown up. And since then, I've gotten divorced. I went back to my maiden name. So I bought my new property in my maiden name so that my students won't be able to Google me from just my last name. I still teach under my married name.
It does happen where they fixate on somebody else, and that does take place for sure.
Jenifer, were you ever tempted to send a message to Glee through your stalker?
Not through my stalker, no.
Did you ever try any other methods to reach out to Glee, possibly?
Oh, yeah. I've done meditations and talked with several of her friends and her husband, writing on her memorial page and, lighting candles. Things that I would have done anyway, because she was, we met when I was in 3rd grade. So she was the maid of honor at my wedding. She was very special to me.
Did you have any success reaching out to her, connecting with her?
She has come to me in dreams twice only since she died. And that's one thing that made me skeptical, because I'm very open to receiving messages. And I've received signs and messages about, several things in my life where it's been, literally somebody going like, hey, pay attention right now. Something bad's about to happen. So if she wanted to get a message to me, all she had to do is come to me herself. That's what made me a little bit skeptical, because why would you go through this poor innocent girl, is what I thought, when you could just come to me directly.
Did any of your other students know that you were being stalked by a former student?
I keep in contact with a couple of students. typically, they start out at community college and then they go on to university. And the ones who have gone beyond that into some sort of grad school or whatever, they keep in contact with me. And then one I've actually become friends with, she was in that class, and so she knows. She's the only student who knows. I've mentioned it in other classes, like essentially don't do this because bad things will happen. You will be expelled, and it's just not appropriate. And every time when I mention it, the look of shock on my students' faces, like, wait, she showed up to your house? Like, everyone knows that that's not appropriate. I don't think it has to be said. It's not in the rule book or anything. It's kind of unspoken, but I think everyone knows that you just don't show up at your professor's house.
How has this changed your view of relationships with students?
Oh, yeah, definitely keeping things at arm's length. I haven't had any students be daydreamy staring at me like that since, male or female. So I'm not, I haven't been frightened or even apprehensive about being myself. I mean, obviously in the first year after she showed up to my house, finishing out that semester was very difficult because I was constantly looking for signs of somebody else being a little bit too interested. But most students, they don't give a damn about their professors' personal lives. They just want to pass their classes, and this is community college. So a lot of them are working, and they're self-absorbed, as, most 18 to 22-year-olds are and maybe should be. So it wasn't long before I was able to go back to feeling like myself in the classroom.
When you got the restraining order, that means she can't go be a teacher. What would you like to see happen to her? Do you think that she has gotten help? Do you feel like justice has been served for you?
I guess to really feel like justice has been served, I would need to know what actually happened to her. And there's really no way of me finding that out without some sort of contact, I guess. And so I've really tried to temper my curiosity to find out. What I would like to have happened is for her to get professional help, to become a normal person again, and fulfill, if you want to be a teacher and fulfill your dream of being a preschool teacher, knowing what's appropriate behavior and what's not. I don't wish ill on anybody, and I would hope that she would just get well as opposed to being punished.
How long was the restraining order for that you got?
2 years.
And is it up now?
Yeah, it was over. It was over a year ago.
Have you connected with any other teachers that have gone through a similar situation like this?
I've asked the teachers that I know. I'm very active in my union, and I've put it out there like, hey, have you ever had a problem with a student stalker? And honestly, it wasn't until the podcast that you guys had a couple of weeks ago that I made a comment to that particular professor, like, oh, hey, yeah, this happened to me too. And so we've actually been messaging each other about our experiences since then. And it's been nice to know that it's not, just me. It's always nice to know that you're not the only one experiencing something negative. That's
incredible.
Yeah. So I appreciate you guys for putting that out there, because when you're stalked, the questions that I would get from people are very victim blaming. Well, what were you wearing? What do you wear to class? Well, what do you, look at you. Of course, someone's going to be interested in you. What is that supposed to be like? Am I supposed to make myself, am I supposed to not be myself? Am I, I like to wear makeup. I like to do my hair. Does that make me an automatic target? And then the most bizarre question that I got was, even my own brother asked me, was she hot? as if my stalker being hot makes her any less frightening. And the answer is no. She was not hot. And even if she was, it would not make it any less frightening. But it's just a very weird question. And I don't know if them asking if she was hot, it was always the men, obviously, who asked if she was hot. None of my women friends asked me or cared. But I think it was because it made them so uncomfortable to know that they're talking to somebody who was victimized, that they would have to provide some levity to it by asking this stupid question. Yeah, I found that kind of belittling, actually, because somehow if she was hot, then the experience wasn't as frightening as it was.
Yeah, and I think because a lot of people don't talk about stalking, when it is put in front of somebody, they don't really know how to react, and it is a lot of victim shaming and victim blaming on that.
Yes, the victim shaming. Yeah, that the only ones who didn't were the dean and the officers who were, escorting me and interviewing me. My husband certainly didn't downplay any of it. He was more frightened than I was, actually, because he felt, as the man of the house, that he should be protecting, and he couldn't always be there. So he was very, very on guard. My boys, I think that they appreciated the severity of the situation. And so they were looking out for their little brother, because at the time my youngest was, he was 8 years old at the time.
What advice do you have for other teachers that come into a situation like this?
I am sure that every teacher at some point or another has had a student that has had a crush. It doesn't always lead to stalking. It doesn't mean that you have to be frightened of it, but certainly don't downplay it. Don't be flattered by it. Don't be encouraging of it in any way, shape, or form. Because I didn't know that I was doing anything to encourage her. She would go to erase my boards. I'm like, oh, you don't have to do that. She's like, oh, no, it's okay. I want to. Okay, you want to erase my boards for me? I was like, okay, sure. Go ahead. I can talk to this student while you're erasing the board. That's helpful. Thank you. But then, you get to the point where if you're doing it every day to be helpful, then there's something else going on.
What's life like for you now?
Well, I'm still teaching at 2 different colleges. I'm active in the union. I'm active in my karate. It's been one of the best things that I could have done. Physically, I'm more fit, I'm stronger, but mentally it helps with my, staying sharp and paying attention to my surroundings and what's going on and perceived threats, that type of thing. And since then I've been divorced, and I live with my boys. And so all of those things, have led me to be a little bit more protective than I might have been. Being armed has been a little bit of a mental shift for me. I've never been against the Second Amendment, but I've never been a huge proponent of it either. But I feel the need. I understand the necessity of it. And just being a little bit more careful wherever I go, even if I go out drinking with my friends, never quite being as carefree as I used to be, because you never know who's around the corner.
I think that happens with a lot of our guests. I think that happens where you have to be extra vigilant from here on out,
Yeah. I think that, especially for women, I think that martial arts should definitely be a PE class in high school. Learning how to defend myself without a weapon has been the most empowering thing that I have ever done. And that has given me a lot of confidence to do a lot of other emotional work that needed to be done. That I don't think that I would have had the backbone. It strengthened my backbone physically and emotionally doing that. So if there's any good that came from having a stalker, I think that would have been it.
That's really great to hear. Jenifer, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
If anyone out there is in need of help or is a victim of stalking, please reach out. You can find a list of resources on our Instagram at Strictly Stalking Pod.
If you'd like to share your story with us on Strictly Stalking, you can reach us at strictlystalkingpod@gmail.com. That's strictlystalkingpod@gmail.com. You can watch our episodes on YouTube at www.youtube.com/strictlystalking.
And now we're on Patreon, where you can sign up for exclusive bonus episodes and check out show merchandise. Just go to patreon.com/strictlystalking.
I'm Jake Deptula.
And I'm Jaimie Beebe. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Strictly Stalking.